All right, here's the article that I read a few days ago. It starts off kind of boring, but I think it gets kind of interesting. This is written by Wyatt Flicker. I don't know who that is, but the Juicy Ecumenism is the Institute for Religion and Democracy, conservative worldview, classical liberal worldview. And so he's talking about the free market. And y'all know my sensibilities are largely libertarian. I don't think that collective decisions are perfect, and they can often be bad. I just think they're better than centralized government decisions. And so the free market is the notion behind that, that if you get out of the way and you let people collectively do what they naturally want to, it's generally going to lead to prospering. There's going to be exceptions, but it's the best system you got this side of heaven. So it says, as U.S. voters return to the polls today, so this was put out before the results of the election, culture war issues are potentially at the top of many Christian voters' minds. Abortion, religious freedom, LGBTQ plus issues, and Israel policy have in recent years informed Christians' decisions in casting a ballot. But attention to these important matters has led some to neglect other policy prescriptions gleaned from the Christian tradition. Christian attention to the free market and property has waned significantly in this election cycle. To revitalize this integral element of Christian politics, there is no better place to turn than the church fathers. See, this is an interesting perspective. Is there a distinctly Christian perspective on the free market? Do the early church fathers speak about it? So this is an interesting tack. I should say, as one with libertarian-leaning sensibilities, it has been a problem for many a libertarian that Donald Trump has spoken openly about instituting and raising tariffs on foreign imports. That's a big no-no in libertarian free market economics, or at least of the Austrian school. So we'll see what happens there. But that is, if you're thinking that Trump is a big free market guy, well, tariffs kind of fly in the face of that. Free market skeptics from the evangelical left to the populist right are often tempted to assume that market economics is a theological innovation of mercantile Dominicans. Remember, the Dominicans were a sect of Roman Catholics, friars, monks, monasteries. There is another word for it: brotherhood, fraternity. That's not it. Fraternal order of Dominican priests. Thrifty reformers or 20th century Christian conservatives, it's often tempting to read gospel verses commanding the rich to sell all they own as an endorsement of state redistribution of wealth, as communists have been prone to do for 150 years. I said that, not him. Instead, the tradition of the church since the patristic period, that means early church fathers, has always been one of economic freedom and voluntary charity. So, in case it's not clear enough, the reason why the Bible does not lend itself to a Marxist understanding of the role of the state, redistributive intervention, is because it's coercive and compulsory. It's not elective. So, should Christians redistribute their blessings for the care and good of the poor? Yes. Should they be compelled to do so? No. That compulsion element is what makes it anti-Christian. It's taking, remember, the devil's in the details. Taking something good and adding something bad to it corrupts it. So it's not like as a Christian, you do have to be a purist because those details will ruin everything. Church Father John Chrysostom is among those most remembered for his writing on wealth while serving as Archbishop of Constantinople, the early church's fieriest orator. He was known as a great preacher. Chrysostom's homilies have long been considered among the foundation of Christian thought on wealth. Chrysostom was such a ferocious opponent of the wealthy that when questioned why he so frequently assailed the rich, he replied, "Because the rich are continually attacking the poor," he said. Despite his disgust for the greed of the rich, Chrysostom understood wealth as a fundamental good deformed by sin. In his homily on Lazarus and the rich man, Chrysostom implored the rich that, quote, "God has permitted you to possess much, that you should distribute it to the needy," end quote. Chrysostom taught that wealth was produced for the good of the community through voluntary distribution. So, in case you haven't read your Bible, this is a thoroughly scriptural position. The rich are addressed specifically in 1 Timothy, in James, Jesus talks to the rich. The uniform instruction to the rich is use that wealth for God's glory and for the care of the poor. It's not for you. You're not an owner, you're a steward. If you reflect an entitlement or a feeling of ownership in the way you spend your money, then your salvation is forfeit. So that if you don't know, there is a lot in the Bible, especially the New Testament, about the importance of what you do and do not do with your money. I just remembered there's a cool tweet I'm going to turn to after this that also has to do with money. It's not going to be long, obviously. It's a tweet. A sharp critic of the market as a hotbed of vice, Chrysostom also found that the market was far from irredeemable. He wrote that man established markets, quote, in order that we may be united with each other, end quote, brought into God's community by satisfying each other's needs through exchange and eschewing luxury. So luxury is not good for Christians. It makes us soft and weak and self-referential. An enduring opponent of excess, Chrysostom still identifies a market economy with robust charity as the proper engagement of Christians with money. Nothing for me to add. I think that's great. This understanding of the economy is also echoed in another patristic opponent of avarice, avarice being the sin of love of money, trust in money, desire of money, St. Basil the Great. Basil harshly excoriated accumulators of vast fortunes, writing, quote, "Your possessions are more a part of you than the members of your own body, and separation from them is as painful as the amputation of one of your limbs," end quote. This is something that is well known, is that the more money and stuff you accrue, the more jealously you guard it and worry about it. You would think that the people most worried about money would be the poor. Actually, they part with their money much more easily, especially for the care of others. One of the shameful things is once, it's not just more money, more problems. It's more money, more love of money, more temptation to money, more greed and hoarding of money. Nevertheless, Basil saw the remedy to the spiritual perils of wealth not as forced redistribution, but as circulation through commerce. Referencing the Psalms, Basil remarked, quote, "If you hoard wealth, you won't keep it. If you scatter, you won't lose. The purpose of money is not to accumulate, but to circulate through the community, exchanging for necessities and aiding the unfortunate." I think this is a great article. This is why I'm sharing it. Basil calls a covetous man one who decides to keep for private use what was given for distribution. This distribution is not the construction of grand public works through the beneficence of the state, which the Greeks called philotimia, and the fathers despised. Rather, Basil implores the faithful to give freely to each other out of interpersonal obligation derived from our common humanity, rather than a top-down system of reallocation. So a lot of people would say, hey, the rich, they need to pay their fair share. We need to help them care for the poor and build these big public works that are needed. And this author is disagreeing. The early church fathers disagreed. That's a kind of vanity that is not good. Beyond Chrysostom and Basil, similar concepts are found in Ambrose, Augustine, and Gregory of Nyssa. As Christians engaging in the public sphere, we must remember that although the poor will always be among us, the early church understood the solution to the problem of poverty as astoundingly simple: the voluntary transfer of wealth, the circulation of goods in a market economy, and a church willing to rebuke the state and private greed are the foundational elements of Christian economic thought. That's a great paragraph right there. Amidst hot-button debates on tariffs, price controls, and other state transfer mechanisms, we must recall that our money is the Lord's, however we may have gathered it, and encourage our legislators to act accordingly. So, summing up our thoughts on that, I really think that's worthy of reflection. I know a lot of people don't like thinking about money. Satan benefits from that. Jesus said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And he's talking about money and stuff. So we really need to order our lives by these things. Be warned. I mean, the scriptures talk about this very explicitly. If you do not align your wallet with a right heart with Jesus, there will be bad things for you. And that's whether you have a little money or a lot of money. The parable of the talents applies to money and more than money as well. So keep in mind, this stuff matters. And I love that I'm about to interview somebody who helps people who struggle financially.